Jake Morrison stepped off the transport shuttle and looked around the massive space station. Everything here was bigger than he expected. The walls stretched up so high he could barely see the ceiling. Aliens of all shapes and sizes walked past him, and most of them gave him strange looks before hurrying away. He was the first human cadet at the Galactic Coalition Military Academy. Earth had only joined the galactic community 15 years ago, and humans were still new to everyone. Jake knew this would be hard, but he wanted to prove that humans could work with other species. The academy was a training center for soldiers from dozens of different worlds. Most of the aliens came from peaceful planets where life was easy. They evolved eating plants or small animals. Real predators were rare in the coalition. Most violent species had destroyed themselves long before they could travel to other worlds. Jake picked up his bag and followed the signs to the cadet quarters. Along the way, he noticed how other cadets acted around him. The Zentari, who looked like tall rabbits with blue fur, would freeze when they saw him. Then they would quickly hop away. The Kelvorians, gentle giants who stood 8 feet tall, would look down and avoid his eyes. It made Jake feel lonely, but he understood why they were scared. Humans came from Earth, and Earth was what the galaxy called a death world. The weather could kill you. The animals were dangerous. Even the plants could hurt you. The gravity was so strong that most aliens could barely walk on Earth's surface without special equipment. Jake's first week at the academy was tough. In combat training, he had to hold back so he wouldn't hurt anyone. What felt like easy exercise to him left other cadets exhausted. In strategy classes, he sat alone because no one wanted to be his partner. At meals, empty seats surrounded him in the cafeteria, but Jake never got angry or gave up. He smiled at everyone he met. When a Zentari cadet struggled with the obstacle course, Jake stopped to help him. When a Kelvorian dropped her books, Jake picked them up for her. He treated everyone with respect and kindness even when they didn't return it. He also loved talking about Earth. During breaks, he would tell stories about the wildlife back home. He described lions hunting on the plains of Africa. He talked about bears fishing in Alaskan rivers. He explained how great white sharks ruled the oceans. Jake thought these stories were amazing, but he didn't notice how uncomfortable they made the other cadets feel. Everything changed on the 10th day. The academy had a large biodome where they grew plants from different worlds. Cadets went there for biology lessons and sometimes just to relax. The dome had trees, gardens, and small streams. It was peaceful and beautiful. Jake was in the dome for a training exercise when he heard screaming. 6 small creatures came running through the bushes. They were cavern cubs, the children of Security Chief Varka. The caverns were one of the few true predator species in the coalition. They evolved as pack hunters on their home world. Even as babies, they were dangerous. They had sharp claws and teeth, and their hunting instincts were strong. The cubs had escaped from their guardian and were now running wild through the training area. The other cadets panicked. Some climbed trees. Others hid behind rocks. The instructors started shouting orders and calling for a lockdown. Everyone was scared because cavern cubs, when frightened or excited, could hurt people badly. Jake didn't run. He saw a bench near a small pond and walked over to it. He sat down slowly and pulled his lunch out of his bag. It was just a sandwich and some fruit, nothing special. He started eating and pretended like nothing was wrong. The cubs noticed him right away. They stopped running and looked at him with their big eyes. Jake kept eating. He didn't stare at them or make sudden moves. He just sat there calm and quiet. One cub took a careful step toward him. Then another step. Jake broke off a small piece of his sandwich and held it out. The cub sniffed the air, then came closer and took the food gently from his hand. It made a soft chirping sound, almost like a purr. That was all it took. Within minutes, all 6 cubs were gathered around Jake. 2 sat at his feet. 1 leaned against his leg. Another climbed onto the bench beside him. The 5th one was playing with his shoelaces. The 6th cub, the smallest one, crawled into his lap and fell asleep. Jake petted them gently, the way he used to pet his dog back home in Montana. The cubs made happy sounds and settled down completely. They weren't scared or aggressive anymore. They looked peaceful and content, like puppies taking a nap in the sun. Security Chief Varka came running into the dome. She was breathing hard and looked worried. Behind her, a team of security officers carried special nets and tranquilizer guns. They were ready for a dangerous situation. But when Varka saw what was happening, she stopped dead in her tracks. Her cubs, her precious and normally wild cubs, were sleeping peacefully around a human. The human was just sitting there, eating his lunch and gently scratching behind one cub's ear. It was the strangest thing Varka had ever seen. Varka was a tough warrior. She had fought in 3 wars and had scars to prove it. She wasn't easily surprised. But this surprised her. Her cubs were usually nervous around strangers. They only trusted their immediate family. Even other caverns had to be careful around them. They should have seen this human as a threat, another predator in their space. Instead, they treated him like he was part of their pack. Jake looked up and saw Varka staring at him. He smiled. "I hope it's okay that I fed them a little bit of my lunch," he said. "They seemed hungry." Varka walked closer slowly. She didn't want to startle the cubs or break whatever magic was happening here. Her cubs looked up at her and chirped happily, but they didn't leave Jake's side. The smallest one just yawned and went back to sleep in the human's lap. "How did you do this?" Varka asked. Her voice was quiet, filled with wonder. "They never act like this with strangers, never." Jake shrugged. "I didn't really do anything. I just sat down and shared my food. They came to me on their own." By now, other cadets and instructors had gathered around, watching from a safe distance. They couldn't believe what they were seeing. The video feed from the biodome was being watched all over the station. Everyone was talking about the human who had somehow tamed 6 wild cavern cubs without even trying. Varka carefully picked up her cubs one by one. They whined a little when she took them away from Jake, but they went with their mother peacefully. Before she left, Varka turned back to look at Jake. She studied his face for a long moment. "What is your name?" "Cadet," she asked. "Jake Morrison." "Ma'am, well, Jake Morrison," Varka said slowly. "You have done something very special today. My cubs are good judges of character. If they trust you, then perhaps I should trust you too." She walked away with her cubs, leaving Jake sitting on the bench. The other cadets slowly came out of hiding. They looked at Jake differently now. The fear was still there, but something else had been added. Curiosity, respect, wonder. That night, Jake became famous across the entire academy. The video of him with the cubs spread through the station's network. Aliens from all over watched it again and again. They couldn't understand how a predator from a death world had made the cubs feel so safe. Scientists started asking questions. Instructors began studying the footage. Everyone wanted to know the human's secret, but Jake didn't think he had a secret. He had just done what felt natural. He had been calm and kind. He had shared his food. He had treated the cubs with gentle respect. It was the same way he had always treated animals back on Earth, and it seemed to work here too. As Jake lay in his bed that night, he thought about home. He remembered his family's ranch in Montana. He remembered the horses, the dogs, and even the wild animals that sometimes came near the house. His father had taught him that the key to dealing with animals was simple. Stay calm, show respect. Never be aggressive unless you have to be. Strength doesn't mean you have to be loud or scary. Real strength is quiet and controlled. Jake didn't know it yet, but that simple philosophy would change everything. Not just for him, but for the entire Galactic Coalition. He was about to teach the galaxy something they had forgotten. Safety doesn't come from being weak or harmless. Safety comes from being strong enough to protect others, but kind enough never to hurt them. And that was something humans understood better than anyone else in the stars. The video of Jake and the cavern cubs became the most watched recording in Academy history. Students who had never spoken to Jake before now wanted to know everything about him. Where did he come from? How did he stay so calm? What was his secret? But something else happened that surprised Jake even more. The cubs started following him everywhere. Every morning when he went for his run around the station, he would find all 6 cubs waiting outside his door. They would run alongside him, their little legs working hard to keep up. When he studied in the library, they would curl up under his table and sleep. During meals, they would sit at his feet and look up at him with hopeful eyes. Security Chief Varka didn't stop them. She watched this strange friendship grow and said nothing. Other officers were confused. Some were worried. But Varka trusted her cubs. If they wanted to be with the human, she would allow it. 3 weeks after the incident in the biodome, Jake was eating lunch in the cafeteria. 2 cubs were asleep under his chair. One was chewing on a toy next to his boot. The other 3 were playing nearby, rolling and tumbling over each other. Jake watched them with a smile while he ate his food. A shadow fell across his table. Jake looked up and saw Instructor Zelith standing there. Zelith was a Havarian, which meant she looked like a giant praying mantis that walked on two legs. She was old, very old, and she taught xenopsychology, which was the study of how different alien minds worked. She had been teaching at the academy for 30 years. "May I sit down?" Zelith asked. Her voice was clicking and strange, but the translation device in Jake's ear made it sound normal. "Of course," Jake said. He moved his tray to make room. Zelith sat down carefully. Her large eyes watched the cubs playing. She was quiet for a moment, thinking. Then she looked at Jake with an expression he couldn't quite read. "I have a question for you, Cadet Morrison," she said. "It is a question that many of us have been asking. Why are the predator cubs always around you?" Jake stopped eating and thought about the question. He looked down at the cubs. One of them had woken up and was now chewing on his shoelace. He reached down and gently moved the cub's mouth away from his boot. "Because they feel safe," Jake said. It seemed obvious to him. Why else would they stay so close? Zelith's mandibles clicked together, which Jake had learned meant she was interested. "Safe from what? You are a predator species yourself. You come from a death world. By every measure of biology and behavior, you should be a threat to them. They should see you as competition, as someone dangerous to be around. Yet they follow you like you are their parent. Why?" Jake picked up one of the cubs and set it in his lap. The little creature immediately curled up and closed its eyes. Jake petted its soft fur while he tried to explain something he had never really put into words before. "Where I come from, the most dangerous predators are the calm ones," Jake began. "Think about a wolf. A wolf that is barking and growling and making a lot of noise is usually scared, or trying to scare you away. But a wolf that is quiet and calm, that's a wolf that is confident. That's a wolf that doesn't need to prove how strong it is." Zelith listened carefully. Her large eyes never left his face. "These cubs can sense that I'm not afraid of them," Jake continued. "And I'm not trying to scare them either. I'm not trying to show them how tough I am. I'm just here being myself. Animals are smart. They can tell when someone is dangerous but doesn't want to hurt them. That's what makes them feel safe. They know I could be dangerous if I needed to be, but they also know I would never hurt them, so they can relax around me." He paused and looked down at the cub in his lap. It was snoring softly now. On Earth, we have a saying, "Speak softly and carry a big stick." It means that truly strong people don't need to yell or act tough all the time. Real strength is quiet. The cubs understand that. They can feel that I have strength, but I'm not using it against them. Instead, I'm using it to protect them. That's why they stay close to me. Zelith was silent for a long time. She watched as another cub climbed up onto the bench and pressed against Jake's side. The human just smiled and made room for it. "This is very interesting," Zelith said finally. "Your species evolved as hunters, yes? You tracked and killed prey for food?" "Yes," Jake said. "But we also evolved as pack animals. We worked together, and we learned to work with other species too. We turned wolves into dogs. We made horses our partners. We even kept cats around to protect our food from mice. Humans are good at forming bonds with other creatures, even creatures that are very different from us. Because you needed to understand them," Zelith said slowly. "You needed to read their emotions and know what they were thinking." "Exactly," Jake said. "My grandfather used to train horses back on Earth. He taught me that you can't force an animal to trust you. You have to show them that you're trustworthy. You do that by being calm, being patient, and never losing your temper. Even when you're scared or frustrated, you stay in control. And that is what these cubs sense in you," Zelith said. "Controlled strength. Power that is held back by choice, not by weakness." "I guess so," Jake said. He had never thought about it in those exact words, but it made sense. The cubs weren't the only ones paying attention to Jake now. Other students had gathered at nearby tables, listening to the conversation. They were starting to understand something important. This human wasn't dangerous because he was violent or aggressive. He was dangerous because he was strong and in control. And somehow that made him safer to be around than someone who was weak or unpredictable. Over the next few days, things began to change at the academy. A Zentari cadet named Kilo approached Jake during physical training. He was struggling with a climbing exercise that was easy for Jake but hard for his species. Jake helped him find a different technique that worked better for his body type. Kilo thanked him and didn't run away like he used to. A Kelvorian student named Mara asked Jake to be her partner in strategy class. She was brilliant at planning but terrible at physical combat. Jake was the opposite. Together, they made a good team. They won every simulation they ran. Slowly but surely, the other cadets stopped being afraid of Jake. They saw how gentle he was with the cubs. They noticed how he helped anyone who needed it. They realized that being strong didn't mean being cruel. Jake taught them that lesson without ever saying it out loud. He just lived it every day. But not everyone was happy about this. There was a group of cadets from a species called the Torven. The Torven were not predators, but they were aggressive. Their culture valued dominance and strength above all else. They believed that showing kindness was the same as showing weakness. The leader of the Torven cadets was named Grix. He was tall and muscular, and he loved to intimidate other students. He didn't like how much attention Jake was getting. He especially didn't like how the cubs followed Jake around. In Grix's mind, those cubs should have been scared of everyone, including the human. One day, Grix confronted Jake in the hallway. 3 of his friends were with him. The cubs were there too, as always, playing around Jake's feet. "You think you're special," Grix said. His voice was loud and challenging. "You think because some baby animals like you, that makes you important?" Jake looked at Grix calmly. He didn't rise to the bait. "No," he said quietly. "I don't think I'm special. I'm just trying to do my job and get along with everyone." The cubs had stopped playing. They sensed the tension in the air. They moved closer to Jake, their eyes watching Grix carefully. "You're weak," Grix said. He stepped closer, trying to use his size to intimidate Jake. "That's why you act so nice all the time. You're afraid to show your real strength." Jake didn't move back. He stood his ground, but his body language stayed relaxed. His voice remained calm. "I'm not weak, Grix, and I'm not afraid. But I don't need to prove my strength by picking fights. That's not what real strength looks like." The cubs started making a low growling sound. Even as babies, they were protective of Jake. Grix noticed this and took a step back. He wasn't stupid. He knew those cubs could hurt him if they wanted to. "This isn't over," Grix said. He turned and walked away with his friends. But everyone in that hallway knew that Jake had won that confrontation without throwing a single punch. He had stayed calm. He had spoken with quiet confidence. And he had shown that real power doesn't need to be loud or aggressive. That night, Instructor Zelith filed a report with the Academy's command staff. Her report was titled, "Understanding Human Psychology and Its Effect on Cross-Species Relations." In it, she explained what she had learned from watching Jake Morrison. Humans, she wrote, had evolved a unique combination of traits. They were predators with the ability to control their instincts. They were strong but chose to be gentle. They understood that true safety came not from eliminating all threats, but from being the kind of threat that chooses not to harm others. Her report caught the attention of Admiral Theron, the head of the Academy. He read it 3 times. Then he started watching footage of Jake Morrison. He saw the human helping other cadets. He saw how the cubs trusted him completely. He saw Jake handle confrontations with Grix without ever losing his calm. Admiral Theron began to think. The Coalition had always struggled with integrating different species, especially predators and prey species who had trouble working together. What if this human had found the key to solving that problem? What if the solution wasn't about making predators less? Admiral Theron's test came sooner than anyone expected. The Academy was chosen to host an important diplomatic meeting between several Coalition species. They needed to negotiate mining rights in an asteroid field that sat between their territories. It should have been a simple meeting, but there was a problem. 2 of the species involved were the Caverns and the Zentari. The Caverns and Zentari had a long and painful history. Thousands of years ago, Cavern explorers had brought some of their animals to a Zentari colony world. Those animals escaped and became an invasive species. They hunted the native prey that the Zentari depended on for food. Millions of Zentari died in the famine that followed. Even though it happened so long ago, neither species had forgotten. The Zentari saw all Caverns as dangerous predators who couldn't be trusted. The Caverns felt guilty but also defensive about something their ancestors did by accident. The diplomatic meeting needed security, and Admiral Theron made an unusual decision. He assigned Jake Morrison to the security team. Jake was still just a cadet, not even graduated yet. But Theron wanted to see what the human could do. He paired Jake with both Cavern and Zentari security officers. It was a test to see if Jake's calm presence could help these 2 species work together. On Jake's team were Officer Draken, a Cavern warrior with years of experience, and Lieutenant Kessa, a Zentari officer who was one of the best tactical minds in her species. Both were excellent at their jobs. Both were professional, but they couldn't stand being near each other. The first day of the meeting was difficult. Draken and Kessa stayed on opposite sides of the room. They communicated through their team's radio system, rather than talking face to face. During breaks, Draken would go outside while Kessa stayed inside. They were like magnets with the same charge, always pushing away from each other. Jake watched all of this and said nothing. He was patient. He had learned growing up on a ranch that you couldn't force animals to get along. You had to give them time and space. You had to show them that cooperation was better than fighting. On the second day, Jake did something simple but important. During lunch break, he sat down at a table that was right between where Draken and Kessa usually sat. Then he opened his lunch and started eating. The cubs, who had been allowed to come along because they wouldn't leave Jake's side, settled down around his feet. Draken came in and saw Jake sitting there. He hesitated, then walked over and sat down near the human. A few minutes later, Kessa entered. She saw both Jake and Draken, and for a moment it looked like she might leave. But something about Jake's calm presence made her stay. She sat down at the same table, as far from Draken as possible, but still at the same table. Jake started talking about Earth. He told them about his family's ranch. He described how they raised cattle, which were large animals that humans used for food and leather. But they didn't hunt the cattle like wild predators. They took care of them, protected them from other predators, and made sure they had food and water. We also had dogs, Jake said. Dogs came from wolves, which are predators that used to hunt our ancestors. But over thousands of years, we learned to work together. The dogs helped us hunt and protected our homes. In return, we gave them food and shelter. We turned enemies into family. Kessa was listening carefully. That sounds impossible, she said quietly. How can prey trust a predator? The instinct to run is so strong. Jake nodded. You're right. The instinct is strong. But we also have another instinct, the instinct to survive. And sometimes working with a predator helps you survive better than running from them. My grandmother kept chickens. We had a dog that slept in the chicken coop at night. That dog was descended from wolves. Every instinct said it should hunt those chickens. But it didn't. You know why? Why? Draken asked. He was interested now too. Because the dog understood that protecting the chickens meant it got fed every day, Jake explained. It had a warm place to sleep. It had humans who cared for it. Hunting the chickens would give it one meal, but protecting them gave it a whole life. The dog chose the better option. And the chickens learned that this particular predator was on their side. But how did the chickens learn that? Kessa asked. She leaned forward, forgetting for a moment that Draken was sitting at the same table. How did they overcome their fear? Time and consistency, Jake said. The dog never attacked them, not once. Day after day, night after night, the dog was there and nothing bad happened. Eventually, the chickens' fear faded. They started to trust. Some of them would even sleep next to the dog on cold nights. There was a long silence. Then Draken spoke. His voice was rough. But Lieutenant Kessa can't know that I won't attack. My species did attack hers, even if it was by accident. How can I prove I'm trustworthy when history says I'm not? Kessa looked at Draken directly for the first time since the mission started. Her large eyes were sad. And I can't know that my species won't run away when things get dangerous. We evolved to flee from threats. What if my instincts make me abandon you when you need backup? Jake looked at both of them. You're both right. You can't know for sure what will happen. Trust isn't about being certain. Trust is about making a choice despite the uncertainty. You choose to believe in each other's character, not in your instincts. One of the cubs climbed up onto the table and walked over to Kessa. The Zentari officer froze. The cub was a predator, and every fiber of her being screamed at her to run. But she watched as the cub sniffed her hand curiously, then gently touched its nose to her fingers. It trusts you, Jake said softly. This cub is a cavern just like Draken. It could hurt you if it wanted to, but it chooses not to. And right now you're choosing not to run. That's trust. That's what it looks like. Kessa's hand was shaking, but she didn't pull away. The cub made a soft chirping sound and then jumped down from the table, going back to play with its siblings. Kessa let out a breath she didn't know she had been holding. I didn't run, she said, almost to herself. Her voice was filled with wonder. Every part of me wanted to run, but I didn't. And I wasn't thinking about hunting you, Draken added. He sounded surprised. I saw you as a teammate, not as prey. That's progress, Jake said with a smile. It's not perfect, and it won't happen all at once. but it's a start. Over the next few days, things changed between Draken and Kessa. They started talking to each other directly. They planned their security routes together. They even shared a joke about one of the diplomats who kept falling asleep during the boring parts of the negotiation. Jake didn't force them to be friends. He just created an environment where friendship was possible. He showed them through his own example that different species could work together. He let the cubs be around both of them, helping them get used to each other's presence. He told stories about Earth that made them think about cooperation in new ways. On the last day of the diplomatic meeting, something happened that proved how far they had come. One of the diplomats, a member of the Torvin species, got angry during the negotiations. He stood up and knocked over his chair. The sudden loud noise startled everyone. Kessa's prey instincts kicked in immediately. She jumped up ready to run, but then she looked at Drakon. The Kevran officer was standing too, but he wasn't moving toward the threat. He was standing protectively, positioned between the angry diplomat and Kessa. It was an instinctive move on his part, protecting a teammate. Kessa saw this and made a choice. Instead of running, she moved to stand beside Drakon. Together, they calmly approached the angry diplomat and helped him settle down. They worked as a team, using Kessa's diplomatic skills and Drakon's physical presence to defuse the situation. Jake watched from his position by the door. The cubs were next to him, calm and quiet. He felt proud, not of himself, but of Drakon and Kessa. They had overcome millions of years of evolution. They had chosen to trust each other when everything in their biology told them not to. That took real courage. After the meeting ended successfully, Admiral Theron called Jake to his office. The Admiral was a tall Kelvorian with white fur and kind eyes. He gestured for Jake to sit down. "I've been watching the security footage from the diplomatic meeting," Theron said. "What you did with Officers Drakon and Kessa was remarkable. A month ago, those two couldn't be in the same room. Now they're requesting to work together on future assignments." Jake shrugged. "I didn't really do anything special, sir. I just gave them a chance to see each other as people instead of as predator and prey." "That is exactly what makes it special," Theron said. "Most beings in the galaxy have accepted that some species can't work together. We've built our whole society around that assumption. We keep predator species and prey species separate. We give them different jobs and different living areas. We think that's the only way to keep peace. But you've shown us something different. You've shown us that maybe the problem isn't biology. Maybe the problem is that we've never tried to create the right environment for cooperation." The Admiral stood up and walked to his window. He looked out at the stars. "I want to create a new program," he said. "A training initiative based on what you've taught us. We'll call it the Integration Corps. Its job will be to help different species learn to work together, especially species that have historically been enemies or have trouble cooperating. That sound dangerous, but Jake had been at the academy for 3 months when the emergency call came through. A civilian transport ship had suffered a massive engine failure. It was drifting in space near the academy's orbit, and its life support systems were failing. The ship carried 307 passengers from a dozen different species. 75 of them were children. They had less than 6 hours before everyone on that ship would die. The academy went into emergency mode immediately. Every shuttle was prepared for launch. Every trained rescue worker was called to duty. The plan was to evacuate everyone from the dying ship and bring them safely to the station. It should have been simple, but there was a major problem. The transport ship's hull was breaking apart. Large pieces of metal were floating around the ship, creating a dangerous debris field. Any shuttle that got too close could be hit and damaged. The standard rescue procedures were too slow. They needed people who could make quick decisions in chaos, who wouldn't freeze up when unexpected things happened. Jake was in the cafeteria when he heard the announcement. Without thinking, he ran to the shuttle bay. He wanted to help, but when he got there, the rescue coordinator stopped him. "You're not certified for emergency operations, Cadet. You need to stay here." Jake was about to argue when Security Chief Varka pushed past the coordinator. "The human comes with me," she said. Her voice left no room for argument. "My cubs trust him. I trust my cubs. He's on my team." The coordinator looked like he wanted to object, but Varka was already walking away. Jake followed her to a shuttle where Officers Drakon and Lieutenant Kessa were doing final equipment checks. The team that had learned to work together during the diplomatic meeting was going to work together again, this time in a life-or-death situation. The cubs tried to follow Jake onto the shuttle, but Varka gently pushed them back. "Not this time, little ones," she told them. "This is too dangerous. Stay here and be good." The cubs whined but obeyed. They watched through the shuttle bay window as Jake's shuttle launched into space. The flight to the damaged transport ship took only 10 minutes, but it felt much longer. Jake could see the ship through the shuttle's windows. It was listing to one side, and pieces of its hull were breaking off. Small explosions flashed in the darkness as systems failed. It looked bad. The rescue was chaos from the moment they docked. The transport ship was dark inside because the power was failing. Emergency lights flickered on and off. People were screaming, running in panic. Some were injured from falling debris. Others were just terrified. The air smelled like smoke and burning plastic. Varka took charge immediately. "Draken, Kessa, Morrison, with me. We take the lower decks. The other teams will handle the upper sections. Move fast, but stay together." They moved through the ship quickly. Jake's job was to help carry injured passengers who couldn't walk on their own. His human strength, which came from evolving on a high-gravity world, made this easy for him. What would have been heavy for other species was manageable for Jake. But the debris field created constant problems. Several times they had to change their route because corridors were blocked by fallen metal. Once, a wall exploded outward right next to them as pressure built up behind it. Kessa screamed and jumped back. Her prey instincts told her to run, to get away from the danger as fast as possible. Jake grabbed her arm gently. "Kessa, look at me." His voice was calm, steady. "We're okay. That was scary, but we're not hurt. Take a breath. We need to keep moving, but we need you thinking clearly." Kessa looked into his eyes and saw no fear there. Not because Jake wasn't scared, he was, but because he knew that panic would kill them faster than any debris. She took a deep breath and nodded. "I'm okay. Let's keep going." Later, when they found a group of survivors huddled in a storage room, Draken's predatory instincts almost took over. He saw frightened people, injured and bleeding, and something ancient in his brain saw prey. His muscles tensed. His claws extended slightly. It only lasted a second, but everyone noticed. Jake moved to Draken's side and put a hand on his shoulder. The contact broke the moment. Draken blinked and his claws retracted. The predatory look left his eyes. He nodded at Jake, a silent thank you for pulling him back from the edge of his instincts. They evacuated that group successfully and moved deeper into the ship. The hardest part came when they reached the children's section. The ship had a special area designed to keep young passengers safe and entertained during long voyages. But the safety systems had failed. 20 cavern children were trapped inside, and the door was jammed. Varka tried the emergency override, but it didn't work. Draken and Jake forced the door open together. Inside, they found pure chaos. The cavern children were in full panic mode. Their predatory instincts had been triggered by fear and confusion. They were hissing, clawing, biting anything that came near them. 2 adult caverns had already tried to help and had been injured. Even Varka hesitated. These weren't her own cubs. They were frightened children who couldn't tell friend from enemy right now. Getting close to them was extremely dangerous. "We might need to use tranquilizers," she said reluctantly. "It's not safe to approach them like this." Jake looked at the terrified children and made a decision. "Let me try something first." Before anyone could stop him, Jake walked into the room. The children turned toward him, their eyes wild. They hissed and showed their teeth. Jake didn't run, he didn't try to grab them. He sat down on the floor in the middle of the room. Then he started talking. His voice was soft and calm. He told them a story about Earth, about a time when he was 8 years old and got lost in a snowstorm. The snow was so thick he couldn't see. The wind was so loud he couldn't hear. He was cold and scared and thought he might die. "My father found me," Jake said. "I was so happy to see him that I tried to run, but he told me to stop. He said that running in a storm was dangerous. I might fall and hurt myself. So instead he sat down in the snow next to me. We sat there together until the storm got quieter. Then we walked home, slowly and carefully, I was scared that day, Jake continued. Just like you're scared right now. But my father taught me something important. When you're scared, the best thing you can do is stop and breathe. Running around in panic makes things worse. Being calm makes you safer. The cavern children were listening now. They had stopped hissing. Their bodies were still tense, but they weren't attacking. One child took a small step toward Jake, then another. Slowly, carefully, they approached him. Jake held out his hands, palms up, non-threatening. The first child sniffed his hand, then made a small chirping sound. The others followed. Within 5 minutes, all 20 children were gathered around Jake. Some were touching his arms. Others were leaning against him. They had gone from wild panic to calm trust. Okay, everyone, Jake said gently. We need to leave this ship now. It's not safe here, but I promise you'll be okay. We're going to walk together to a shuttle, and then we'll take you somewhere safe. Can you do that for me? The children nodded. They held onto Jake's uniform, his hands, anything they could reach. He led them out of the room like a teacher leading a class. Varka, Drakon, and Kessa stared in amazement. What should have taken an hour with tranquilizers and struggling children had taken less than 10 minutes, and no force at all. They got the children onto the shuttle safely. Then they went back for more survivors. Over the next 4 hours, they made 6 trips. Each trip was dangerous. Each trip tested their skills and their nerves, but they worked together perfectly. When Kessa's fear threatened to overwhelm her, Jake or Drakon would steady her. When Drakon's instincts tried to take over, Kessa or Jake would help him refocus. When Jake's strength wasn't enough, the others stepped in to help. They were the last team to leave the transport ship. As their shuttle pulled away, the transport's main reactor finally failed. The ship broke apart completely, scattering into thousands of pieces. If they had been 5 minutes slower, they would have died. Back at the academy, the Cubs rushed to Jake the moment he stepped off the shuttle. They climbed all over him, checking to make sure he was okay. Jake laughed and petted them, feeling exhausted but grateful to be alive. Admiral Theron called an emergency meeting to debrief all the rescue teams. Out of 307 passengers, they had saved every single one. 0 deaths, 0 serious injuries. It was the most successful rescue operation in Academy history. In his report, Theron specifically mentioned Jake's team. He wrote that their success wasn't just about their individual skills, it was about how they worked together. A cavern, a Centauri, and a human, species that should have struggled to cooperate, had instead formed the most effective rescue team of the entire operation. Multiple team members credited Jake with keeping them calm and focused. His presence, his steady voice, and his controlled strength had given them the confidence to do their jobs even when everything around them was falling apart. He hadn't just saved passengers. He had saved his teammates from their own instincts. That night, Jake sat in his quarters with the Cubs sleeping around him. He thought about the rescue, about the scared cavern children, about his teammates pushing past their biological limits. He realized that what he had been teaching wasn't really new. It was ancient. His ancestors had known it. Every species that formed societies had to learn it eventually. Control your fear. Control your anger. Choose cooperation over conf. The weeks following the rescue operation brought unexpected changes to the Academy. Jake Morrison became famous across the entire Galactic Coalition. News outlets from hundreds of worlds ran stories about the human Cadet, who had saved cavern children with nothing but calm words and gentle presence. Scientists wanted to study him. Military leaders wanted to meet him. Diplomats wanted to learn his methods, but Jake found all the attention uncomfortable. He didn't think he had done anything special. He had just acted the way his parents and grandparents had taught him to act. Stay calm in crisis. Treat others with respect. Use strength to protect, not to harm. These weren't revolutionary ideas on Earth. They were just common sense. However, what seemed like common sense to humans was revolutionary to the rest of the galaxy. The Coalition had spent thousands of years accepting that certain species couldn't work together. They had built their entire society around keeping predators and prey separated. They believed this separation was the only way to maintain peace. Jake had proven them wrong. He had shown that predators and prey could work together if given the right environment and leadership. He had demonstrated that instincts could be controlled, that biology wasn't destiny, and that true safety came from choosing cooperation over conflict. Instructor Zelith spent weeks writing a comprehensive paper about her observations. She called it Understanding Human Emotional Intelligence and Its Applications in Cross-Species Cooperation. The paper explained how humans had evolved unique abilities that made them natural mediators between different species. Humans are persistence hunters from a death world, Zelith wrote. This means they evolved to stay calm under extreme stress. They can function in conditions that would paralyze other species with fear. But more importantly, humans domesticated dozens of other species throughout their history. They learned to read emotions across species barriers. They developed the ability to form bonds with creatures completely different from themselves. This combination of controlled strength and emotional intelligence is exactly what the Coalition needs. Her paper was presented to the Coalition High Council, the group of leaders who made decisions for all member species. They read it 3 times. They watched all the footage of Jake with the cubs. They reviewed the rescue operation recordings. They interviewed Officers Draken and Kessa and Security Chief Varka. Everyone told them the same thing. The human was different. The human had found a way to bridge gaps that others thought were impossible to cross. Admiral Theron proposed the Integration Corps program to the High Council. It would be a new branch of the Coalition military, focused on helping different species learn to work together. The program would teach the principles that Jake had demonstrated. Controlled strength, emotional awareness, choosing trust over instinct, creating environments where cooperation was possible. The High Council debated for days. Some members were skeptical. They worried that trying to force predators and prey to work together would create more problems than it solved. Others argued that the Coalition had stagnated because of species separation. They needed new approaches if they wanted to grow stronger. Finally, they reached a decision. The Integration Corps would be approved as a pilot program. If it succeeded, it would be expanded across the entire Coalition. If it failed, it would be quietly shut down. They gave Admiral Theron 1 year to prove the concept worked. Theron immediately asked Jake to lead the first training class. Jake had just graduated from the academy with honors. He was young for such an important position, but Theron believed age didn't matter. Jake had the skills and, more importantly, he had the temperament to teach others. Before accepting the position, Jake made his request about the cubs being part of the program. Theron agreed without hesitation. The cubs, now almost fully grown, had become symbols of successful cross-species cooperation. Videos of them sleeping peacefully around Jake had been viewed billions of times across the galaxy. If anything could help convince skeptics that the program would work, it was those 6 cavern predators who trusted a human completely. The first Integration Corps training class began with 30 students from 15 different species. Half were predator species like caverns, half were prey species like Zentari. Many of them were nervous. Some were openly hostile. They didn't believe this training would work. They thought their biology was too strong to overcome. Jake started the first day with a simple exercise. He brought the cubs into the classroom and sat down on the floor. The cubs immediately surrounded him, some lying down, others playing gently. Then Jake invited the students to approach one at a time and interact with the cubs while he was there. The prey species students were terrified at first. Their every instinct screamed at them to run from the predators. But with Jake there, calm and relaxed, they found the courage to try. They sat near the cubs. They touched their soft fur. They looked into their eyes and saw curiosity instead of hunger. The predator species students were equally surprised. They expected to feel aggressive around prey species, to see them as weak or as potential targets. Instead, with Jake's calm presence setting the tone, they felt protective. They wanted to help the prey species students feel safe, not threaten them. That first exercise taught them the most important lesson. Environment matters. When someone strong and calm creates a safe space, everyone can relax. Instincts don't disappear, but they become manageable. Fear doesn't vanish, but it becomes less controlling. Biology still exists, but it doesn't have to determine behavior. Over the following months, Jake taught them everything he knew. He shared stories from Earth about humans and animals working together. He explained how his grandfather trained horses by being patient and consistent. He described how his grandmother's chickens and dogs lived together peacefully. He taught them breathing exercises to stay calm under stress. He showed them how to read body language across species barriers. Most importantly, he taught them about controlled strength. Real power, he told them, isn't about how much damage you can do. Real power is knowing you could do damage but choosing not to. When you control your strength, when you use it only to protect and never to harm, others can trust you. That trust creates real safety. The training wasn't easy. There were setbacks. One cavern student almost attacked a Zentari student during a high-stress exercise. A Zentari student panicked and ran during a team-building activity. But each time something went wrong, Jake was there to help them understand what happened and how to do better next time.
He never got angry.
He never gave up on anyone. He just kept teaching, kept demonstrating, kept showing them that cooperation was possible. By the end of the year, the results were undeniable. The Integration Corps First Class had formed bonds that no one thought possible. Predator and prey species students had become friends. They worked together on projects. They trusted each other with their lives. More importantly, they could teach others. Each graduate went back to their homeworlds as ambassadors of this new way of thinking. The High Council reviewed the program and voted unanimously to expand it. Within 5 years, the Integration Corps had trained over 1,000 officers. Teams that once couldn't work together were now the most effective units in the coalition military. Conflicts between predator and prey species decreased dramatically. The entire coalition became stronger and more united. But success brought new challenges. Jake found himself traveling constantly, giving speeches, training new instructors, and consulting on difficult integration problems. The work was rewarding but exhausting. Sometimes he missed the simple days at the academy, when his biggest concern was helping a fellow cadet with obstacle course technique. Through it all, the cubs stayed with him. They were full-grown adults now, working as security officers themselves. But they never forgot their bond with Jake. When he returned from trips, they would greet him like he had been gone for years instead of days. When he gave speeches to large audiences, they would sit calmly at his feet, living proof that his methods worked. Security Chief Varka, now retired, visited Jake often. She brought her newest litter of cubs to meet him. The pattern repeated every time. The young cubs, barely able to walk, would immediately go to Jake. They would climb on him, nuzzle his hands, and fall asleep in his lap. The bond between humans and caverns had become legendary across the galaxy. One evening, Varka watched her newest cub sleeping around Jake and asked him the question that started everything. Why do the predator cubs always come to you? After all these years, she still found it remarkable. Jake gave the same answer he had given years ago. Because they feel safe. But Varka pressed further. Yes, but why do they feel safe? You're a predator too. You're from a death world. You could be dangerous to them. What makes you different? Jake thought for a long moment before answering. I think it's because they know I've made a choice. I have the strength to hurt them, but I've chosen to protect them instead. That choice is visible in everything I do. How I move, how I speak, how I react to stress. They see someone who has power but uses it responsibly. That's what makes them feel safe. He paused, watching a tiny cub chew on his bootlace. Safety isn't about being harmless, he continued. It's about being powerful enough to face danger, but key.